Now, that was a flat-out terrible performance by the Packers against the Detroit Lions. I went into this game hopeful. I thought that we could pull it off even without some of our defensive starters. I thought that with Jordan Love being healthy enough that he could do enough to put up enough points for the Packers to be in this one. I knew the Lions had a great offense, and I, going into it, thought the Packers would need to put up a lot of points. And honestly, the biggest reason for this loss was the Packers' inability to actually score touchdowns. Now, of course, typically that's probably the problem for teams who don't win games. But when you look at the yardage the Packers gained, they had no issue moving the ball. They had 411 total yards on offense. Compare that to the Lions, who had 261 yards on offense. The Packers had more yards per play, 6.6, to the Lions, 4.7. And the problem that continued today, that has been an issue all season long for the Packers, is their inability to score touchdowns in the red zone. Last year, they were somewhere around like 18th in the NFL. And going into this game, they're about 25th. And if we look at their numbers for today, they were in the red zone 4 different times, and they went 1 for 4 in the red zone, and the 1 touchdown conversion was later in the game. And so all day long, the Packers were moving the ball down the field, but they settled for 2 field goals. They missed another field goal, and then they just can't seem to score touchdowns when they get to the red zone. And it's a shame because this Packers offense is so good. Entering this game, they're a top 10 scoring offense. But when you have this much trouble in the red zone, it's going to be really hard to win games. And so, as I said, the Packers, they move the ball fine most of the day. But they need to find a way to score in the red zone, because if they don't do that, they're not going to be able to compete with teams like the Detroit Lions. And, there's so many issues with this game. I'm trying to think of which one I want to touch on next. There were so many mistakes just on so many aspects of this game, mostly on the offensive side of the ball. There were a few on the defensive side. But I think there were a total of 6 drops in this game. If not 6, 7, it was somewhere around there. I think it was 6. There were a lot of, there was the one play where Love threw it to Wicks late in the fourth quarter, and it wasn't a perfect ball. It was slightly behind Wicks. I think typically you would say he should have caught it. I understand with the weather, with the elements, that it was a tough play to make, but he still dropped that one. There were a total of, I think, 6 drops. And so there were a lot of other, what would have been first down conversions that weren't conversions because they dropped the ball. And so you have all those mistakes. Then you have penalties. The Packers had 10 penalties for 67 yards. And it felt like any time the Packers got something going, a penalty was called that held it back. There were a lot of holds. There were some false starts. There was a hold by Keyshawn Nixon on the 3rd down where the Packers got a stop. And so tons of drops. Tons of penalties. And then we do need to bring up Jordan Love and his pick 6. And I would love to see Jordan Love, not have these really, really bad interceptions, but it is becoming somewhat of a theme. He threw a pick 6 like this, a few weeks ago that looked pretty similar. He was in the end zone trying to avoid a safety last time. This time he was trying to escape the pocket. I think it was a screen call. He's trying to throw a screen. And he looked like he wasn't fully mobile like he typically is. And he just, I guess, doesn't see the guy standing right there. Throws a terrible pick 6. And so Jordan Love's interceptions are a problem. And lots of times this year, he sort of made up for it by throwing a ton of touchdowns, which is why he's up there when it comes to, passing touchdowns per game. But in this one, he wasn't able to throw a touchdown pass. As I said earlier, potentially could have been one to Dontavian Wicks. And so he does throw for 273 yards, but has 0 touchdowns and 1 interception. And so when you make mistakes like that, it just really puts your team in a really, really tough spot when you throw pick 6s like that, when you just make really, really bad decisions where he should have just either taken the sack or thrown it in a place where, your guy, or where you have no risk of interception. And he's willing to take those risks, which as we've said at times, work out. And lots of times, he's a high risk, high reward player. And he just has to find a way to eliminate these kind of plays. Because if you look at this game, it finished 24-14. And you take away that pick 6, that's a 17-14 game. And so that's a much different game if Jordan Love does not throw that pick 6. It would have been, I think, probably 10-3 leaving the first half. And so that's a much different game than, 17-3 going into the half with the Lions getting the ball. It really did shift the game in a big way when Jordan Love threw that interception. And when he threw that interception, I was thinking the Packers should have put Malik Willis in, just because on that play, it looked like he was pretty immobile. He wasn't able to move around a lot, and I thought that the Packers offense could have been a little more effective with Malik Willis in there because he can scramble. He does have that ability. Now, Jordan Love did come in the second half. He made a lot of nice plays. He was running around a lot. I was slightly concerned that he would re-injure himself. And going into the game, I figured if the Packers let him play, they thought that there wasn't a massive risk of re-injury. I think if they thought there was, they would have sat him out. But it is a big game, and so you want to try to put your guy in if he's ready to go. And entering the second half, I thought they should have put Malik in. Now, Jordan did play well the rest of the half. Didn't really make any other terrible decisions. But it really just wasn't enough late in the game. The Packers, as I said, just couldn't convert, couldn't score when they needed to really try to get back to competing with the Lions and getting close in this game. And so there was a tough day overall for Jordan Love. 23 of 39, a lot of drops. The Packers ran the ball somewhat effectively, 23 carries for 6 yards a carry, but they just got down by so much in this game that they couldn't continue to rely on the run. They had to just pass it because when you're down, 3 possessions, you can't just sit there and run the ball and allow the clock to tick down. So unfortunately, even though they averaged 6 yards a carry, they had to abandon it. Now, I think that honestly, looking at the defensive performance, after the first half, I was like, it was sort of shaky. The rushing defense looked bad. But all in all, you take away the Jordan Love pick six because that's not the defense fault. You hold the Lions to 17 points without Evan Williams and Jair Alexander. Now, that's actually a really solid performance by the Packers defense. Only allowed 7 points in the second half. And so I put the fault of this game on the Packers offense pretty much fully because I think what the Packers defense did, it should have been enough that the Packers could have kept this one close. And you look at Jared Goff, he was very effective, very efficient, 18 of 22, but he only threw the ball for 145 yards. And so, he did pick apart the secondary at times, but it's not like he tore up this Packers team and, was the reason that they necessarily won this game. I mean, he didn't throw any bad interceptions like Jordan Love. He played clean football. And because the Packers offense was so bad, the Lions offense didn't really have to do that much. They ran the ball for 124 yards, only 3.9 yards a carry. So all in all, it was a pretty good day from the Packers defense when you really look at it. Now, they didn't force a turnover, which is something that has really been a big boost for the Packers defense this year, is their ability to force a ton of turnovers, unlike last season. But all in all, to hold David Montgomery, 4.3 yards a carry, Jahmyr Gibbs did run effectively, as he typically does. Only 11 carries, but 65 yards at 5.9 yards a carry. They couldn't really stop him when he was running the ball. And so, as I said, this one falls on the offense for me. I think the defense did enough. Because if you entered before this game you told me the Packers defense would allow 17 points, I'd say, okay, the offense needs to come in and make up for that and, score 20, 23 points to win this game. And the Packers offense couldn't do it. And so, going forward, the Packers are 6-3. It's a fine spot to be in. There's going to be a bye week, so we have 2 weeks to think about this game. You'd rather enter the bye with a win, but Packers enter with a loss. But 6-3 isn't bad. You are 2 games behind the Lions now in the NFC North. They have the win on you as well, and so how do I feel going into the rest of the season? I just feel like this is a game where the Packers really did hurt themselves a lot. A lot of penalties, a lot of drops, a lot of mistakes, a lot of miscues, some bad snaps from Elton Jenkins, who was filling in for an injured Josh Myers. But I think that I'm not terribly concerned for the rest of the season. It's just a bad loss in some pretty bad conditions. But the Lions were able to manage it much better than the Packers were able to. They didn't really make a ton of mistakes, which the Packers did make a ton of mistakes. And so lots of times that's what these games come down to. And going forward, hopefully in 2 weeks, Jordan Love is fully healthy and fully ready to go out there. And I think that if you sat him, obviously in hindsight, you'd say you sit him because you lost and you get an extra week of, getting healthy. But it sort of just is what it is for Jordan Love. And hopefully in 2 weeks, he's out there able to be fully mobile, because I do think he was hurt a little bit because he couldn't really take off and do what he wants to do. He tried a lot and it worked sometimes. I was a little nervous in the second half there watching him run around because I didn't want to see him really re-aggravate that injury and put him back in a big way. But the Packers have a ton of clean up on the offensive side of the ball. They just have to find a way to score touchdowns in the red zone. If they had scored a touchdown or two in this one, it would have been a much closer game. If Jordan Love doesn't throw the pick, he needs to figure out a way not to throw these interceptions And I mean, now if we look at Jordan Love and his stats for the season, past 2 games, he hasn't been good. 196 yards last game, 73.3 passer rating. 273 today, but a 59% completion percentage, a 69.7 passer rating. So the past 2 games, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. It hasn't been good enough from Jordan Love. And if you look at every game this season, he's thrown an interception. He's thrown 1, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. So he's a streak going of a pick every single game this year for a total of 15 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. And the thing is, when you throw this many picks, you have to make up for it with, a lot of touchdowns. And he could have had one there with Wicks dropping it, but he has to clean these things up if the Packers want to, be a team that can, when you're playing a good team like the Lions, you can't be making mistakes like throwing pick sixes. So hopefully he can clean that up moving forward. The Packers ran the ball well. Josh Jacobs had a very, very big day, 13 carries, 95 yards, had to abandon the run early because of, the game getting behind them. But, when you see the total, 411 yards to 261, that's something I do think the Packers can fix. It's just so many mistakes. And we saw it last year. The Packers got beat pretty handedly by the Lions somewhat early in the year. Later, they, of course, beat the Lions on Thanksgiving, and they were able to really compete at a high level later in the season. So it's early in the year. I don't think this is a loss where you're like, oh no, this is it for the Packers for the season. Definitely not. I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to iron out a lot of these issues, and hopefully we'll see this team come out ready to play the Bears after the bye. But that's all I have for this one. If you guys want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below. I'll be out with more content this week, so stay tuned for that. But I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you guys next time.